Abraham Lincoln Biography Part 2. In this House-divided speech, Lincoln gave a prophetic utterance to the potential for slavery to divide the nation. Although he lost this 1858 Senate election, his debating skills and oratory caused him to become well known within the Republican Party. On February 27, 1860, Lincoln was also invited to give a notable address at Cooper Union in New York. The East Coast was relatively new territory for Lincoln. Many in the audience thought his appearance awkward and even ugly, but his calls for moral clarity over the wrongness of slavery struck a chord with his East Coast audience. Let us have faith that right makes might, and in that faith, let us, to the end, dare to do our duty as we understand it. The reputation he gained on the campaign trail and speeches on the East Coast caused him to be put forward as a candidate for the Republican nominee for president in 1860. Lincoln was an outsider because he had much less experience than other leading candidates such as Stewart, Bates, and Chase, but after finishing second on the first ballot, he went on to become unexpected. After a hard-fought, divisive campaign of 1860, Lincoln was elected the first Republican president of the United States. Lincoln's support came entirely from the north and west of the country. The South strongly disagreed with Lincoln's position on slavery. The election of Lincoln as president in 1861 sparked the South to secede from the North. Southern independence sentiment had been growing for many years, and the election of a president opposed to slavery was the final straw. However, Lincoln resolutely opposed the breakaway of the South, and this led to the American Civil War, with Lincoln committed to preserving the Union. Lincoln surprised many by including in his cabinet the main rivals from the 1860 Republican campaign. It demonstrated Lincoln's willingness and ability to work with people of different political and personal approaches. This helped to keep the Republican Party together. The Civil War was much more costly than many people anticipated, and at times Lincoln appeared to be losing the support of the general population. But Lincoln's patient leadership and willingness to work with Unionist Democrats held the country together. Lincoln oversaw many of the military aspects of the war and promoted the General Ulysses S. Grant to command the Northern. Initially, the war was primarily about the secession of Southern states and the survival of the Union, but as the war progressed, Lincoln increasingly made the issue of ending slavery paramount. On September 22, 1862, Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation that declared the freedom of slaves within the Confederacy. The proclamation came into force on January 1, 1863. Towards the end of the year, many black regiments were raised to help the Union Army. After a difficult opening to years, by 1863, the tide of war started to swing towards the Union forces, helped by the victory at the Battle of Gettysburg in July 1863. Lincoln felt able to. After a difficult opening to years, by 1863, the tide of war started to swing towards the Union forces, helped by the victory at The Battle of Gettysburg in July 1863, Lincoln felt able to
redefine the goals of the Civil War to include the ending of slavery, dedicating the ceremony at Gettysburg on November 19, 1863, Lincoln declared
that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people. Eventually, after 4 years of attrition, the federal forces secured the surrender of the defeated South. The Union had been saved and the issue of slavery had been brought to a head. In the aftermath of the Civil War, Lincoln sought to reunite the country, offering a generous settlement to the South. When asked how to deal with the Southern states, Lincoln replied, "Let them up easy." Lincoln was opposed by more radical factions who wanted greater activism in the South to ensure civil rights for freed slaves. On January 31, 1865, Lincoln helped pass through Congress a bill to outlaw slavery. The 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution was officially signed into law on December 6, 1865.
Some Northern abolitionists and Republicans wanted Lincoln to go further and implement full racial equality on issues of education and voting rights. Lincoln was unwilling to do this.
Didn't always agree with the policies of Lincoln, but after meeting Lincoln, he said enthusiastically of the president. 5 days after the surrender of Robert E. Lee and the Confederate Army, Lincoln was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth while visiting Ford's Theater. Lincoln's death was widely mourned across. Lincoln is widely regarded as one of America's most influential and important presidents, as well as saving the Union and promoting Republican values. Lincoln was viewed as embodying the ideals of honesty and integrity. Thank you for watching.